Hello all, my name is Swapnil Doizat. Presently I am working as a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Medical Microbiology at Justus Liebig University, Gießen, Germany. I have been working on the microbial genomics, particularly exploring the role of genome sequencing to study pathogenic bacteria. I am really excited to share what I am doing and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's start. First, let's see what is whole genome sequencing is. By definition, whole genome sequencing is to obtain complete nucleotide sequence of a given organism. In case of bacteria, it essentially comprises chromosome, but other extra chromosomal elements such as prophage and plasmid. By using a normal DNA isolation kit or protocols that is used in any common laboratory, uh, the DNA can be isolated or whole genome sequence can be isolated and then sequenced on different platforms or different machines, and then we translate this data in a recognizable way in order to identify what are the genes that encoded on this genome. The success of sequencing lies in sequencing technology. Sanger sequencing was the first sequencing technology started in 1970s. Now we are in a phase of second or third generation sequencing technology. Second generation sequencing is based on massive parallel sequencing, while third generation is based on single molecule, that is single DNA molecule sequencing. Now let me show you this in detail. The second generation sequencing technology, mostly carried out by Illumina, this comprised of the short reads. Here what happens is, as you guys must be knowing that bacterial genomes varies between 2 to 6 MB. Now this genome is fragmented and these fragments got sequenced and identified what are the nucleotide sequence of these fragments. So these fragments are 50 to 300 base pairs, and once we sequence this fragment in massive parallel way, so for example one sequence got sequenced like hundreds of times, and then we have to reassemble these fragments in order to reconstruct our bacterial genome. In case of third generation sequencing technology, this sequencing technology is based on a long read, so as compared to 50 to 300 bases, we get up to 10,000 bases or sometimes 40,000 bases based on the quality of a DNA you have isolated. And this sequencing molecules or this sequencing this sequenced raw reads or DNA can be generated by using machines called as PacBio or NanoBio. Again, similar to short reads, we have to reassemble these long reads, and these long reads has to be assembled in such a way to construct our bacterial genomes in between 2 to 6 MB size. Here I would like to show you the comparison of first, second and third generation sequencing technology, and here you can see that the accuracy of the first generation, second generation and third generation, the time required, the read lengths, the cost of the equipment as well as the cost of the bases that is generated or the cost of the sequencing in short. You can see in case of second generation we can get 99.9% of accuracy for a single read, and for a million bases it cost $5 to $10. When the sequencing started during 1998 or 1999 for a first bacteria, that time it cost million of dollars to sequence one single bacteria. But today it requires only $100 or €100 to sequence one bacteria, or less than that. Now in case of third generation sequencing technology, although at present the accuracy is not that great, however this is a matter of time that they will improve with the accuracy, and we can sequence actually a single molecule of DNA completely, and we will able to obtain this such kind of sequences. This is a mini ion sequencer, a third generation sequencer that you can put in your pocket. This is a simple transportable or a mobile device similar to our mobile sizes, and you can take it to the field. As an example I'm showing here, and with a small setup you can isolate the DNA in a field and you can identify which bacteria it is. And how this is going to happen, I'm showing you now. As whatever bacteria is determined by their genetic content, we get comprehensive information of that particular bacteria through whole genome sequence. We have obtained now a whole genome sequence of a pathogen. Now what we can do with this sequence? We have to analyze this sequence or translate this sequence in a way that we can recognize what this encodes for. In this presentation, I would like to show you how we can use whole genome sequence to identify a bacterial pathogen in an accurate manner or more properly. How we can use antibiotic sensitivity or resistance profile, how we can have analysis of a clone, if this is a new clone, if this is outbreak clone, what are their virulence characteristics, what are the genomic component of pathogens, how we can know when this bacterial isolate has emerged, and if this emerged, then if it is present across globe. One of the first and key steps in clinical microbiology is to identify a bacterial pathogen. A correct identification is necessary to assess the risk of pathogen and treatment. For example, if the etiological agent is Listeria monocytogenes, there is a risk of meningitis or septicemia or abortion. While if the infection is due to Enterobacter species, there is a high risk of relative severe blood infection and organism is likely a drug resistant one. While presently practiced method has their own advantage and disadvantage, in many diagnostic laboratories presently, bacterial pathogens are identified based on their morphological characteristics or based on their biochemical test or by using MALDI-TOF or by using PCR, qPCR and similar other methods. Now, to identify bacteria by using these classical approaches takes at least 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes bacteria, if it is a slow growing, it takes long time, up to 3 to 4 weeks, for example mycobacteria. In case of whole genome sequencing, from isolation of DNA to identification, now it takes 20 minutes. Not only this, while by using classical techniques we only identify bacteria, but once the whole genome sequence that is generated, we can use or we can explore this DNA sequence to identify what are the virulence characteristics, what are the how is their antibiotic resistance profile, if these clones are emerged or not emerged, or this is like a clone that has been persisting for a long time, and so on. So whole genome sequencing always give a better advantage or better perspective as compared to the classical identification technique. Now let's see how we can use whole genome sequence to identify a bacterial pathogen. Now we have a query genome. Query genome is a genome of a bacterial isolate that we have, let's say, isolated in our diagnostic laboratory, and we wish to identify which bacterial genera or bacterial species it belongs to. Now we compare this query genome to reference genome. This comparison is carried out in silico method or bioinformatically. Here we use 1020 base pair segments that we align to the reference genome. What we do is we calculate the nucleotide identity between these segments. Now for example, this particular segment has all nucleotide that is matching with the reference genome. Here we have 950 or 790 bases that is matching to the reference genome. And finally we calculate the average nucleotide identity. Based on classical 70% DNA hybridization techniques that, as you must be aware of, that been used to identify bacterial species, a large scale study shows that average nucleotide identity, if more than 95%, then it defines a bacterial species. It means that if the query genome has more than 95% average nucleotide identity to reference genome, the query genomes belongs to the reference genome species. The advantage of bacterial whole genome sequence identification is that whole genome sequence, as it's saying whole, it's based on complete data. Now as you know that as I showed in the last slide, that classical identification techniques, for example PCR, qPCR, MALDI-TOF, morphological characteristics and biochemical characteristics, they're based on single or few of the characteristics of bacteria and not all the characteristics of bacteria. In case of whole genome sequence, we are using whole complete characteristics that can be possible with the bacteria. So this gives a more accuracy for identification, and this is like a more comprehensive approach. Not only this, whole genome sequence being a digital method, it's more accurate and one can share the data. For example, initially you could not share a 70% DNA hybridization data. Even more, the 70% DNA hybridization, if I do here in Germany and I come back to India and I do in your laboratory, there can be a fluctuation of plus minus 5%. However, Being a digital whole genome sequence analysis, if I do here or if I go somewhere and if I do or you guys do, if I share with you, it will be very consistent. So this give an advantage and there will not be any variation for identification. So whole genome sequence give an advantage in order to be very consistent or reproducible results. Now let's see with a real example how whole genome sequencing is helping us to identify bacterial pathogens in real world. So there was an outbreak in neonatal unit in Bugando Medical Center in Tanzania due to gram-negative enteric isolates. The case fatality rate was high. Isolates were multiple drug resistant, and based on fermentation and agglutination characteristics, these isolates were identified initially to be Salmonella. However, by using commercial kits, the isolates were identified to be Enterobacter cloacae. Now there was a conflict between these two analyses. Therefore, we investigated this case and by using 16S ribosomal DNA and RPOB gene sequence. And this analysis also showed that this bacteria could belong to the Enterobacter species. But even this type of analysis could not identify which exactly species this is. So as you can see, there is a confusion between commercial biochemical kits and the 16S ribosomal DNA and the classical techniques that we have been using. We use then whole genome sequencing to identify this bacterial pathogen. To identify this Tanzania outbreak isolates precisely, we carried out whole genome sequencing. First, we compared these isolates to each other by using in silico DNA hybridization, as I showed you in last slide. As you can see, there is 100% DNA hybridization value among these isolates. It means that they belongs to a single species. There is no genomic differences, and this is a single clone. When we compare these isolates to the Enterobacter, they showed 20 to 37% identity or 20 to 45% identity to different Enterobacter species. When we compare to the Salmonella species, the identity was even low or less than 20%. So this means that this group of outbreak isolates belong to Enterobacter, but they belong to a novel species within Enterobacter that yet has to be identified. So we identified this as a novel species and then we gave a name Enterobacter bugandensis. So in this way, not only whole genome sequencing not only giving an idea about identification of bacteria, but it's giving idea about if the species is novel or known. Now let's see how we can use whole genome sequence to identify if bacterial pathogen is highly virulent or low virulent. The intensity of pathogenicity is based on the quality and quantity of virulent gene. What we do is once we have a whole genome sequence of a bacteria, we try to identify virulent genes. How many and which virulent genes present in a given bacterial isolates or encoded by given bacterial isolates. Now based on their quality and quantity, this bacteria can be identified as high virulent. If the virulent genes are present in low number, they can be classified as a moderately virulent, and if they have a really low number, they can be classified as a low virulent. Here I would like to give an example of Serratia marcescens and how whole genome sequencing is helping us to identify their virulence capability. Now as you must be aware of that Serratia marcescens is a red pigment producer, and when they grow at room temperature they show a red pigmented colonies. In Germany or worldwide also, several Serratia marcescens isolates observed in the clinical cases do not show pigment, and now we would like to compare here the non-pigmented and pigmented colonies in order to see their virulence capability. Here I am showing you a comparison of pigmented and non-pigmented Serratia marcescens genome. So what we did basically is we sequenced the whole genome of pigmented and non-pigmented strain and compared to each other. Now the blue lines indicate the genes from the pigmented strain and the red line indicates the gene from non-pigmented strain. Now there are certain gaps. So these gaps shows that the genes are present in one organism but absent in other. Now when we looked at virulent genes, the virulent genes you can see these are present only in the red segment. It means they are only present in non-pigmented. So this means the non-pigmented strains are more virulent as compared to the pigmented strains. This will be in a bit greater detail, but I would like to show how we are comparing or how we are using whole genome sequence data to compare different group of pathogens. So here Serratia marcescens. So on the left side I am showing you a phylogeny of approximately 700 Serratia marcescens isolates. Each line represent here a single Serratia marcescens, and you can see the neonatal outbreaks are grouped in a particular clade or particular phylogenetic group, and neonatal outbreak are grouped here. On the right hand side I am showing you a panel. This is a panel of virulent genes, and you can see the virulent genes either absent in a blue or present in a yellow. Now you can compare the neonatal outbreak isolates to non-neonatal outbreak isolates, and you can see a relatively more number of virulent genes that are present in neonatal outbreak isolates. So that means these isolates are more virulent as compared to the non-neonatal outbreak isolates. So this is how a whole genome sequence based study gives an idea about virulence properties of pathogens. The bacteria involved in the case of outbreaks are highly clonal and hard to distinguish from each other. However, these clones should be distinguished from their distant relatives. For example, if you have swab from gut or hospital environment, you may likely to get more than one type of bacteria or one type of pathogen. For example, Serratia or Enterobacter species that are also present in hospital environment as well as in our gut as a normal flora. So they are really involved in the outbreak or just a residential flora. How to distinguish this? If outbreak occurred, how clonal are these isolates? How different these isolates from non-outbreak related members? This is very crucial information during an outbreak. I would like to give an example of Acinetobacter baumannii outbreak that we investigated. So there was an outbreak in University Hospital in Kiel, a city in Germany. In approximately 6-week period, 41 patients were infected. If we look at the PFG pattern, it looks the same. But the real question was from where these isolates came from, or what was the origin of these isolates. Based on PFG profile, it looks like these isolates are the same. Then we carried out whole genome sequencing to differentiate this bacteria. Then we looked at their nucleotide sequence data. There was a difference of 9 nucleotides in their genome. So it means there was a difference of 9 bases of 4 million nucleotides. And this data helped us to further discriminate these outbreak isolates. Importantly, these 9 nucleotide differences gave us an idea about which strain was the originated and which were the progenies. So you can see here these are the different strains shown in circles, and these numbers indicates the nucleotide differences. And you can see, for example, 2, and in addition to 2 there is 1. So based on these nucleotide differences, how this strain got originated from their original strain could be determined. As we know, there were difference of 9 nucleotides from the isolates that were obtained in 45 days. We reconstructed the relation between these isolates. So you can see here this phylogeny or a tree where isolates got placed according to their nucleotide differences as well as the date. You can see the days here, and for example this isolate was isolated on 26th day of outbreak. This is the first day of the outbreak, and so on. We use this information to calculate when the ancestral strains was existed. Here we use the Bayesian analysis, a special analysis for molecular dating, and we estimated that the common ancestor was present there 10 days before the outbreak. So what we thought, or during isolation, that we obtained the first isolate and this is the causative agent of rest of the outbreak, but this was not the case. So there was another isolate that were not identified or not isolated by diagnostic laboratory, but that were present before in the hospital environment or maybe in the other patient, but could not be located. So this is how whole genome sequencing is helping us to identify or decode the outbreak clones. Now, when such kind of outbreak occurs or new pathogen comes, there is always question where this pathogen has come from, or where is this pathogen originated from. So whether this is from the different regions of the country and got introduced due to international traveling, or this is due to the isolates that is being mutated, got emerged due to new genetic combination, or possibly due to that this organism is present in the same country or in the same location for a long time, but in a hidden location, and by some way it has got introduced or got back introduced into the public. Now this can be studied based on the whole genome sequence, and we can try to trace from where this organism is coming from at a global perspective. Now, as we have a genome, this gives an opportunity to understand where is your pathogen is coming from. Now, looking at the whole genome sequence data, it's a digital data, and you can compare and have a quick and accurate comparison to the worldwide data. Now, as of today, worldwide data stat shows that we have more than 5,000 trillion bases nucleotide data present for bacteria. Specifically for E. coli, we have more than 125,000 whole genome sequences available in public database, and more than 25,000 transcriptomic data present in a public database, and that you can download and analyze. Not only this whole genome sequence data is deposited with their metadata such as source of isolate, geographical location, collection date, host disease status. So you can compare your isolates or the isolates that is causing outbreak or infection in your region, and you can compare this to the worldwide data, and you can have an idea about from where these isolates are coming from, what is the level of this or what is the level of pathogenicity as compared to the previously studied isolates, and so on. Now, as we had observed Acinetobacter baumannii outbreak in Germany, this was a task to identify from where this isolate is coming from. Then I compared this data to the worldwide data, and that time 8,000 genomes were there for Acinetobacter baumannii, and this particularly group of Acinetobacter baumannii is belonging to the multilocus sequence type 195. So of 8,000 genomes, 99 genomes were belonging to ST195. So this is a multilocus sequence typing where you can subcluster your given species or given pathogen. So I compared our isolates from the Kiel, or these are the outbreak isolates in Germany, to the worldwide isolates. And you can see the majority of the isolates coming from the China, and some of the isolates as coming from the Middle East region. So it looks like, based on the whole genome sequencing data, the isolates was initially originated from the Middle East region, and they got eventually spread in different countries. Next, let's see how whole genome sequencing is helping us to identify antibiotic resistance or sensitivity pattern. The underlying reason of antibiotic resistance can be broadly divided into three groups. So antibiotic resistance can be due to antibiotic resistance genes that deactivates antibiotic, due to nucleotide changes or mutations in certain genes, or due to efflux pumps and their regulations. Certain efflux pumps are involved in efflux out the toxic compounds, including antibiotics. Now there are several databases that are present are maintained by different research group, and this database catalog the antibiotic resistance genes and mutations. And if you have a whole genome sequence, by using tools such as a BLAST, or there are different tools, by using these tools you can identify if your isolate has antibiotic resistant genes or not, or if your isolate has a mutation that is responsible for resistance or not. Using these tools, one can predict what is the antibiotic sensitivity and resistance profile your given isolate has. Now again, going back to the Serratia marcescens example, but here from the antibiotic resistance gene perspective, you can see here the list of the genes, antibiotic resistant genes, and you can see they are either present or absent, and you can see in majority of the isolates many of the genes are present sporadically. But I would like to take your attention particularly in this region, SMEA gene, which is responsible for multi-drug efflux complex for quinolone resistance, and TET41 is a tetracycline efflux pump that is present in majority of the non-outbreak isolates or non-neonatal outbreak isolates, while in case of neonatal isolates, these are not present that commonly. While in case of neonatal outbreak isolates, MEX pump and outer membrane proteins responsible for different antibiotic resistance is present relatively common as compared to the non-neonatal outbreak isolates. Now what this data shows us that how this group of isolates has actually evolved. So use of tetracycline or possibly use of quinolone has selectively enriched non-neonatal outbreak isolates. So whole genome sequencing not only giving an idea about how and to which these isolates are resistant, but this is also giving an evolutionary perspective of these pathogenic isolates, why they are selectively enriched and why other not. Another important aspect from public health point of view is to determine the emergence of pathogen and to know since when the pathogen existed. Is this a novel pathogen or is this the old one that is showing recurrence? In this slide, I would like to summarize the genome-based data for Serratia marcescens, how they have emerged and spread, and how we understood based on the whole genome sequencing. Now here you can see the map of Germany. Here is the phylogenetic tree that I was showing previously, but in different form. And here is the timeline. Now the very first isolate got introduced in 2008 in capital of Germany, Berlin. And eventually these isolates got detected, the pink one got detected with the time. So basically here, based on whole genome sequencing, we could map the Serratia marcescens clones with the time and with the geographical locations. Another important aspect is comparative genomics, where we deal with the comparison of genomic content of two or more organisms. Just to give an example, we compare now, let's say, genome of non-pathogen and pathogen, and we find a region where genes are exclusively present in genome of a pathogen, but this is absent in a non-pathogenic organism. So this gives an idea that these are the genes responsible for additional virulence capability that we are observing these isolates. Not only this, the comparative genomics can be also used to identify the different phenotypic traits that we are observing. For example, one isolate is showing, or one isolate is utilizing certain carbohydrates, but other is not utilizing these carbohydrates, while rest of the properties are the same. So we can compare these genomes to each other and we can find what are the genetic differences that are present between these two genome or two isolates, and then we can see that what are the new genetic elements that has been present in one isolate and absent in other isolates in order to distinguish the phenotypes that we are observing. For comparative genomics, I would like to take example of Listeria monocytogenes and its rhamnose utilization ability. Now, Listeria monocytogenes isolates are grouped into 4 lineages: lineage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Lineage 1, 2, 3 can utilize rhamnose, but lineage 4 cannot utilize rhamnose. Or other species of Listeria, for example, Listeria siligeri, do not utilize rhamnose. Now, what's the difference at their genome level? When we compared their genomes and when we compared the genetic segment, particularly where the rhamnose utilization cassette is present or rhamnose utilization genes are present, these genes are present in lineage 1, 2, 3, but this is absent in lineage 4, as you can see here. And this is why this group of isolates can utilize rhamnose, but this could not utilize rhamnose. So in this way, a comparative genomic analysis is able to tell us that what are the genetic elements that is present and responsible for the particular phenotype. So we can use this for virulence as well as for antibiotic resistance or different kind of phenotypes that we are observing in laboratory. If we observe different phenotypes, we can sequence their genomes and we can compare the genomes to each other in order to identify the gene level differences that are present in these isolates. Not only this, comparative genomics can be used to characterize the genomes, and here I would like to give an example of E. coli, and you can see these are different E. coli and their chromosomes, and these circles represent a chromosome of each isolates, and you can see they from starting from 0 to 500 kilobases, and they're differing in their size. Now, why this difference is present, and what are the genetic elements that are new or got deleted from these genomes? By using comparative genomic analysis, we can identify, and now we are comparing, as previously showed, one genome to other genome, and we are trying to detect which are the genetic segments that are present newly or absent or got deleted from genome. Now you can see these are the insertion deletion sites, means here either a genome got deleted or new genetic segment has got added. Now, what are these genetic elements that are got added or got deleted? We can classify this by using different tools. Now here I am summarizing. For example, these are the genomic islands. These are the region of differences that are new genes that got inserted by horizontal recombination. These are the prophages, and there are certain genetic elements that could not be identified by these tools. Not only this, we can also identify the insertion sequence elements, or we can map these insertion sequence elements back to the chromosome. Insertion sequence elements are generally responsible for the variation of the genomes, and these are generally meant to or they are present in a region where genes or genetic segments are inserted or deleted. Now when we can map all the data to this chromosome, and you can see, for example, here the IS elements got concentrated at the insertion deletion sites, and you can see at almost all places insertion deletion sites got concentrated with the insertion sequence elements. So insertion sequence elements are known to play an important role for horizontal recombinations and the insertion and deletion of the genes. So bottom line is, by using comparative genomic analysis, we can see what are the differences in different genomes, or that what we want to study a certain group of isolates, and what are the differences in these isolates based on their genome. With the genome sequencing, we could identify the genetic elements that we could not capture previously due to limitations of technique. Now let's see one example of this. Before whole genome sequencing, what we know as a whole genome of a bacteria is comprised of a chromosome, plasmid, and possibly DNA or RNA of prophages. Here I would like to show an important discovery that we made by whole genome sequencing, and here you can see that this is a sequence of a plasmid, and you can see this is the pink. It's coverage that we got after sequencing, and you can see the coverage. This is the reads. These are the short reads that I showed in first few slides. These reads makes the assembly, or makes the chromosome, or makes the plasmid. This should be consistent technically, but in this case particularly, we observe a more number of reads in this particular region. When we look more carefully what this region is comprised of IS elements at the end. You can see the ends are getting with the IS elements, and within these IS elements we have different genes, and these genes were responsible for they were encoding antibiotic resistance. This particular gene segment, as the IS elements are present on the both sides, this can circularize each other and can produce a circularized element, which is called as translocatable unit. This translocatable unit, being smaller in size, can transfer in different bacteria easily. Let's say we have different bacteria in our gut, and one bacteria has such kind of genetic segment, and now and there is a kind of antibiotic pressure. Let's say beta-lactam. We have BLAST CTXM15. This gene encodes for beta-lactamase. If there is a pressure of a beta-lactamase or beta-lactam related antibiotics, this gene cassette get activates, and this gene cassette then forms several copies of himself, circular copies. These circular copies can be easily taken by other organisms, and this is an additional element than chromosome and plasmid. So this is a new genetic element that we discovered, which has been called as translocatable unit, and this can easily then spread to different bacteria. They can insert into the chromosome or a plasmid. Here I am showing an example of plasmid, and then they can make several copies of themselves. And if they make several copies of themselves, they can produce genes, or they can produce proteins that can kill, or produce enzyme that can kill the antibiotics. Not only this, they can produce different copies of themselves, and these copies again then can get distributed to the different isolates. So this is a very easy way of distribution of antibiotic resistance genes that we could capture by whole genome sequencing. Now if you look at the traditional techniques such as by using gel electrophoresis, or by using pulse field electrophoresis, this is a very small segments that cannot be captured in your gel. Now this can be captured by using whole genome sequence. What happens is, these are the molecules that are present instantly. When you try to isolate a bacteria and regrow and try to isolate genome, in the meantime such kind of small molecules get destroyed, or these molecules get disappeared, because there is a no need, or there is a no pressure of antibiotic. If there is no antibiotic pressure, these molecules do not replicate and do not get captured in our classical techniques. So this is how whole genome sequencing also helping us to identify new genetic elements that is responsible for the antibiotic resistant genes and many other different phenotypes. So presently, with the whole genome sequencing, we can not only detect chromosome and plasmids or prophage, we can also detect unidentified circular DNA elements, that is called as translocatable unit. That is new extra chromosomal elements identified in our study. Okay, so I would like to summarize my talk by saying that whole genome sequencing is a one-stop solution for public health or diagnostic microbiology, and within 20 minutes we are able to identify now the bacterial pathogen. We are able to get the antibiotic sensitivity or resistance profile of a pathogen, if this clone is a newly emerged, if there's an outbreak clone, what are the virulence characteristics, how pathogenic it is, and so on, and that too in 20 minutes. At the moment, the whole genome sequencing is not routinely used across the globe in every diagnostic laboratory, but it's the matter of time that such kind of sequencing technique will be used on a daily basis or at a personal level basis to identify bacterial pathogen. As you can see that there is a like mobile based devices, or you can have in your pocket, and you can, if you feel sick, you can just get such kind of mobile devices and get yourself tested. Finally, I would like to thank my mentors and my collaborators for this work, and my funding agencies. For students, I have a message that I have tried to compress maximum information, and I'm sure there will be questions from your side. Although I have been told that there will be a session for questioning and answering, but I'll be happy to answer any query or any question that you have. Just do not hesitate to email me. And finally, I would like to thank Dr. Dilecta Di Costa, who gave me the opportunity to present this in front of you. Thank you.